Hi, second graders. At school, we've just started to talk about different kinds of folk tales. And we mentioned that the different kind of folk tales are fairy tales and fables, myths and legends, and of course, tall tales. We said that all folk tales have some things in common. They often teach some kind of a lesson. They often have animals in them that are acting like people. And usually they are very familiar stories that are passed on from generation to generation, which kind of means that people tell the stories to their children and then they tell them to their children. And a lot of times that happens orally, not necessarily through a book, but just by talking through the story. The first kind of folk tale we started talking about are fairy tales. And I want to talk a little bit more about that with you now. Fairy tales are a very specific kind of folk tale, and they're really cool because they have certain characteristics. Some of the characteristics involve the words that we will see at the beginning and the end of the book. The book often starts with once upon a time, and you've probably heard a lot of stories that start like that. The ending words will often be, and they lived happily ever after. Another cool thing in fairy tales is there's usually a good guy, bad guy setup. So there's some kind of a good character and there's some kind of a bad guy or an evil character. In fairy tales, you'll see a lot of royalty, which means kings, queens, princes, and princesses. Or sometimes you'll just see somebody who lives in a castle or some kind of a fabulous house. In fairy tales, it's always kind of fun when magic is involved. And magic is when there's not any logical explanation for why something happens. So it must be just magical. They often have a problem and solution. And the other really cool thing I like to look for in fairy tales is this idea that things happen in threes or in sevens. Let's talk about a book that we read at school. We read Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And in this story, we discovered that indeed it started with those words, once upon a time, and it continued on with, there was a girl named Goldilocks. In this book, we also had a good guy, bad guy setup. Goldilocks was actually the evil character. She went into the bear's house without knocking and destroyed lots of things in the house. The three bears were the good characters. They were just out for a bike ride in this book and came home and found a mess at their house. The other thing that Goldilocks had that I thought was really cool was this idea that things happen in threes. Of course, there were the three bears, and if you look further in the story, you also discover she kind of destroyed three different things. She ate the porridge, she ruined Baby Bear's chair, and then, of course, she was sleeping in Baby Bear's bed. And each time she tried something out, she tried out three things: Papa Bear stuff, then Mama Bear stuff, then Baby Bear stuff. So there were lots of threes in this book. Another story you're really familiar with is Cinderella. Now, in Cinderella, there definitely was good and evil. Cinderella being the good character, the evil character being the stepmother and the wicked stepsisters who were mean to her. There was definitely royalty and a castle because the prince was having a ball and Cinderella wanted to go to it. Also, definitely magic in this story when a pumpkin turned into a carriage and mice turned into horses. There were also threes in the story of Cinderella, the three stepsisters, for example. So, here's what I'm going to have you do today. In just a minute, I'm going to have you read a story called Jack and the Beanstalk that is a fairy tale. You're going to read the story, then you're going to answer some questions about it. One of the questions that you have to answer is, why is Jack and the Beanstalk a fairy tale? And you're going to have to use some things off this chart to prove that Jack and the Beanstalk is a fairy tale. And you'll also have to tell what happened in the book that proves your thinking. Do a great job and make sure you write in complete sentences on the last question, please.